holidays, everybody, and welcome to Rolanda. This is the busiest travel week of the entire year, and here at Newark International, like at most airports all across the nation, the rush is on. We're racing off to see our families, to see our friends, or just get away from it all. It's a shame, though, that every time we pick up the newspaper, it seems we're reading about another airplane disaster, when in reality, air travel is by far the safest means of transportation. Your chances of dying in a plane crash are something like 1 in several million. The chances are really slim. And if you're nervous about being that one, then you don't want to miss today's show. We're talking about surviving airplane disasters. That's live, that's right now on Rolanda. Welcome to the show, everybody. We're coming to you live today, and our audience is filled with a lot of people from all over the United States. A lot of people have been hopping on planes, getting out of town. This Thanksgiving week alone, an estimated 4 million Americans are going to be taking to the skies. But there's going to be something else up there in that air flying with many of those passengers, as many of you have said today, and that is a little fear and anxiety. Because the past 3 months alone have brought us some horrifying news of airplane disasters. First, the fatal crash of a U.S. Airjet that mysteriously nosedived into a wooded ravine near Pittsburgh. All 132 passengers and crew on board that plane lost their lives. Then on October 31st, an American Eagle commuter flight plunged 8,000 feet into an Indiana field, and all 68 people on board that plane died. Adding to these tragedies have been warnings not to fly on small planes, and a New York Times article is suggesting U.S. Air might have been skimping on safety precautions. All of this media focus has certainly generated an awful lot of fear among those of us who fly. But the National Transportation Safety Board states that 80% of airplane crashes are indeed survivable. We are live today, so we invite you to call the number on your screen and join our discussion, because safety in the skies is an issue that affects each and every one of us. And there's a lot of stuff we're going to learn on this show today that you probably didn't know, which might help you save your life in the event of a crash, or just be aware in case you get on a plane. Our first guest is certainly concerned about all of this as well. On July 2nd, a U.S. Airjet crashed during a violent thunderstorm while trying to land at Charlotte Douglas International Airport down in North Carolina. 37 people were killed on that plane. 20 people survived. Tawanda Brown was one of those survivors. Unfortunately, her infant daughter, Denasia, only 9 months old at the time, did not survive the crash. Tawanda has never spoken publicly about the disaster until now. Tawanda also asked that her attorney, Willie Gary, join her for this interview. You specialize, Mr. Gary, in personal injury law, and I'm sure a lot of us want to know what legal ramifications we have in case something goes wrong on a plane. Tawanda, I know this is tough for you, and I just appreciate your being here. How are you coping since the crash?
I'm doing okay. I relive it every day.
Yeah. Losing your 9-month-old baby had to have been a difficult thing for you. I know that that has gotten you concerned about other mothers who carry their children aboard planes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Can we go back and talk about the crash a bit so
Sure.
we can understand what happened? And here's some Kleenexes. You probably won't be the only one crying today. But I appreciate the courage that it takes for you to come here, because you said your main concern was for other mothers carrying babies on board planes.
Yes.
What is the concern that you have, especially with infants, having been there yourself?
Mm-hmm. I wish they would make it a law that all infants or mothers are aware that they can take car seats on the airplanes.
You can take a car seat on the airplane?
Yes, you can.
Did anybody tell you that when you and Denasia were going to take that flight?
No, they did not.
Mm.
I was told that she was a lap baby, so I had to carry her on my lap.
Mm-hmm. What happened on that day?
It was a short flight to Charlotte. Everything seemed to be going fine until the last 5 minutes. I was playing with her, you know, feeding her, doing stuff like that. I didn't know anything until a lady to the left of me. She screamed, "Oh my God, we're going to crash." So at that moment, I just automatically went into shock. I held on to her as tight as I could, and upon the impact, she left my arms.
What happened to her? Did you see where she went?
I saw her go up, and that was it.
What happened to the plane? What happened to you?
The plane broke up into 3 pieces. I was sitting in the last seat, so when I was found towards the back. I wasn't aware of my injuries at the time, but as I got to the hospital, I had a crushed elbow, a broken shoulder, second-degree burns on my arms and ankles.
Whatever happened to your baby? Were you able to find out?
It took a while to find her. I never knew exactly what happened. I read the death certificate, but after reading the papers, I was told she was found about 15 minutes after everybody else. She was found under debris, and she suffered burns on her face and arms, and she died from a head trauma.
What do you wish had happened? Do you wish that, like you had said, that you wish that somebody had told you as a mother that you were allowed to bring your car seat on that flight?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe that Denasia would be alive today had you been able to do that?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Gary, these are tough cases to take on here. How do you deal with people after they've lost, well, for Tawanda's case, the most precious thing in her life, her baby, next to her own life?
It's really difficult, but I think being an attorney as well as a counselor at law, it helps to do more than just try to remedy the wrong. But you have to try to instill in the client that, I take the approach, being a religious person, that God is too wise to make mistakes, and he's not going to put any more on you than you can bear, and you just have to pray. Because it's a tragic situation, it's a frightening situation, and when you lose a child, any mother or father, whoever, it's devastating. And I think you just have to learn, and you try to help your client to deal with it from that perspective.
What I love about Tawanda's doing is she's taking such a horrific situation and trying to warn other people. And during the holidays, that you've got to be aware of this, folks. You can take car seats, your baby car seats on planes, and I don't think a lot of us think about that. What type of legal ramification does someone have if something goes wrong on a plane?
Well, like most other cases, you do have the right to be compensated. I always say to the client, money will never replace the loss. There's nothing, I'm sure, if there was all the gold in the world stacked here on this stage and you said to Wanda,
which would you have, the baby or the money?
She'd
want her baby back, of course. So what type of, are you suing? Are you working
Well,
on?
in these cases, for the most part, you can end up either in a lawsuit to recover the damages that you suffered. And I say damages, and it's, I don't like to associate money with losing a child, but in America, that's the only remedy that you have. You have no other recourse.
Okay, let's continue this conversation. I have to take a commercial right now, and I'm sure that the audience and parents here, as well as a lot of students who are traveling all over, you know, back and forth to school, certainly have some questions for you too throughout the show. Please call in. I'm sure many of you at home are thinking of some things you might like to ask an attorney who handles problems on planes. And we're also going to talk about ways to survive, ways that we can protect ourselves. When we come back, a flight attendant is also going to join us and tell us what it's like preparing a cabin full of terrified passengers for an emergency landing. Stick with us. We'll be right back in a minute. Who will take care of this little girl? A family's battle over Brittany. Don't miss the next Rolanda. Welcome back, everybody. If you're just now joining us, we're talking about something on the minds of a lot of folks right now during these holiday seasons. The surviving airplane disasters is what we're talking about. A very important discussion today on Rolanda. This is the busiest travel week of the entire year, and I'm sure you may have some questions at home. We are live from New York City. We'd like to hear your questions and comments on this topic, so call that number that's being flashed on your screen. Before we move on, just a mention, by the way, that in a major national newspapers across the nation, especially in USA Today, I know I picked one up this morning, U.S. Air has taken this full-page ad announcing new and improved safety measures. This is something that they've come out with all the recent furor over some of their mishaps. What you're about to see right now is among the most graphic videotape of a plane crash ever captured. July 1989, a United Airlines DC-10 bound for Chicago is forced to make an emergency landing in Sioux City, Iowa. This after its hydraulic system fails. The subsequent crash results in 112 deaths, but 184 people did live to talk about it. Jan Brown-Lohr is one of those survivors. She was the senior flight attendant on board that fateful flight, and I'd like to say I'm happy to see you're with us today. Boy, Jan, you were the senior flight attendant aboard that flight. What happens moments before you know that you're about to crash? What goes on? First of all, as you're looking down the cabin and you're seeing hundreds of terrified people, what is going on? What are people saying?
Well, I actually knew 40 minutes before we impacted.
40 minutes?
The engine exploded originally, which is what caused the hydraulic loss, the hydraulic failure. And then after the explosion, my thought was, well, this isn't normal, but everybody's looking at me to see an answer in my face.
That's
and
right.
I just composed myself and try to make it read that, oh, there's nothing wrong at all. And I leave it in the cockpit's hands.
Weren't you yourself scared to death?
As soon as I was called to the cockpit and opened the door, yes, because the whole atmosphere was that this was the worst crisis that we could be in.
Wow.
And yes, part of it is you just freeze over.
How do you still, at the same time, how do you prepare a cabin full of people? I mean, I don't want to say prepare to die. How do you prepare them to survive this accident?
Definitely, it's the positive approach.
Yeah.
That you're preparing people to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I came out of the cockpit and prepped my crew, and then we just tried to make everything look normal. We picked everything up. We were in the middle of a service at the time, put everything away, and then we prepared the passengers. And at that point, it was an enormous amount of teamwork. The passengers were very attentive. You could have heard a pin drop.
From the audience.
Tawanda, have you been able to fly since the accident?
No, I haven't.
In fact, Tawanda took a train here, right?
Yeah.
That's right. I don't blame you, Tawanda. That's it. Have you been able, you went right back to your job, though, Jan, right?
I went back after 3 months. I had some injuries, but I went back after 3 months.
Amazing.
Mine is more of a comment than a question. I just want to say on behalf of all the passengers, thank you, because during the strike, I looked at how much you are not really compensated for your dangerous job, and I'm on the plane constantly, and so I just want to say on behalf of everybody, thank you so much, because people like you need to come out much more.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Come on. And Jan, I will say it, anybody listening could probably say this too. If you've ever been sick on a flight, or your baby had a bad day, or something happened, or there was an emergency, you guys do your jobs. I've got to say that. You do your jobs. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, knowing 40 minutes before it really happened, what was running through your mind, even though you're trying to keep that cool exterior? I mean, what was really going through your head?
I just had to block out my personal life to do the job. Our training, we retrain every year for a full day. We cover every piece of equipment and we fly a variety of airplanes and types of airplanes. We have to be proficient, and in one day we could fly 3 different types of airplanes. So we have to, and they're all slightly different. Opening doors, opening windows, and every time we walk on board the airplane, we pre-flight all of our safety equipment, and I generally run through with a hands-on approach since the accident, so that it's automatic, because that's what it became that day. It was really automatic, and it was the tremendous amount of training that we received.
Tawanda, as a passenger, what did you go through when you realized that the plane was about to crash? What went through your mind?
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to survive. We knew at the very last minute, at the very last, the plane was already crashing. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there in shock.
Yeah. I'm going to continue with your question when we come back, and also when we return, a woman who believes that fate and a seat belt were the only things that saved her life in a plane crash. And later, what can you do to increase your own chances of surviving an airplane catastrophe? Amazingly enough, there's a lot you can do. We'll tell you when we get back.
Love, comfort, nutrition. Today, she trusts you for everything, and your breast milk gives her everything she needs. But if someday her needs change, there's always someone you can trust. Gerber, for a gentle formula patterned after breast milk. For a soy formula for milk-free feeding. For the right formula for your baby. Gerber baby formulas. If it doesn't come from you, shouldn't it come from Gerber?
What do you have to drink? Another box of purple stuff. Mom got me Sunny Delight.
Oh, me too. Except mine's California style.
California style?
It's different from original Sunny D.
Original and California style both come in a fun single-serve size with the same vitamins as Big Sunny D.
Anybody want to try this? Oh, come on, I'll throw in some chipsy doodles. I'll throw in a pickle.
Sunny Delight singles, original and California style. The good stuff kids go for.
Are you torn between 2 lovers? Are you now ready to choose the right one? We'd like to hear your choice and your story. Call Rolanda at 1-800-558-5545. Welcome back, everybody. We are talking today, we're taking the positive approach to travel, talking about surviving an airplane disaster, a possible disaster today on Rolanda. Let me remind you, we are live, we're taking phone calls. Call us in with your thoughts or comments as well. We left you hanging. You had a question.
Yes. The flight attendant, how, because my aunt travels a lot, how could she protect herself?
What are some of the tips that you would say before you get on a plane, and some things we can tell our families, things that are most important to remember that most people may not even think about? Jan?
Well, basically from my job, it's the safety demonstration before you take off.
Jan, I'm glad you said that, because how many folks get on that plane and you're reading the newspaper, talking to your girlfriend on the phone before we even listen to the flight attendant? Sleeping, that's important to do, huh?
I think probably it stems from denial. Nobody wants to think that it could happen to them. It's something that you see on the news, read in the newspaper. It's something that happens to somebody else, but it doesn't happen to me. It was my first thought after I found out how serious I was, I can't believe this is happening to me. So it's just human nature.
Right. Let's take a phone call. Steve is calling from New Jersey. Hi, Steve.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to make some comments. I'm a former airline pilot, a former military pilot. The airline that I flew for is now out of business. First, I'd like to say that I don't know of any other means of transportation that is as safe as flying on an airliner. It's incredibly safe. Safety is a very big issue. And certainly the guys up front are very much concerned about safety, not only for their own lives, but for the passengers in the back. One thing does disturb me, however. Over the years, particularly since deregulation, the salaries of the pilots have gone down drastically. And now, for example, if someone wants to go to work for a commuter airline, they need to pay $300 or some fee for the privilege of receiving an interview. If they, in fact, get through that interview, then they must pay approximately $9,000 to go through a training program.
And your concern is what?
Well, there's a lot of people like myself out there, college-educated, military background, 30 years of flying. I will not go to work for an airline for $15,000 a year, and that's what these people are starting pilots off at.
Okay.
And there's a lot of, if you look at the Sioux City accident,
yeah,
the United
and I've got to hurry.
The level of the quality of the pilots, the background, the experience level was very high. If you look at a lot of the accidents that we've had, not all of them, but many of them, have pilots with a much lower experience level, and basically you get what you pay for in life.
Well, let me tell you this. Statistically, I do like the point that you brought up, because airplane, we don't want to fool anybody here, airplane safety is by far the safest means of transportation. Listen to this. Statistically, and this is from the World Almanac, statistically, you would have to take one flight per day for 29,000 years before you would be involved in an accident. But if you're that one who's concerned about this, this show is for you. And I know that I've learned a lot doing this show, some little tips, like nylon stockings, the first to go up in a fire. And how many women know that? We get on the plane trying to look good by the time we land. We're going to learn about more tips like that. But first, let me bring in this new guest. March 22nd, 1992 is a date our next guest will never forget. Kendra St. Charles was about to return home to Cleveland after a business trip to New York. Well, unfortunately, it was snowing that day, and her U.S. Air flight did not make it as planned. Instead, it crashed into the icy waters surrounding LaGuardia Airport just seconds after takeoff. 27 people aboard that flight died. The cause of the crash? Ice on the wings. And if you're from New York City, as I am, that is sure a tale we don't forget. This is the first time Kendra St. Charles has ever spoken publicly about the accident. We will hear what she has to say when we come back. If you're going to be in the New York area and would like free tickets to Rolanda, please call us at 212-650-2060. As I said, this is the very first time that Kendra St. Charles has ever spoken publicly about the airplane crash right outside of LaGuardia Airport in the snow. How in the world does a person survive a crash like that? How did you survive?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with luck, quite honestly. I switched seats twice. So that was just a freak coincidence that I happened to switch seats.
And you said that had you been in those other two seats that you were sitting in previously, you wouldn't be here on the show today.
Both of those people were killed.
Wow. Amazing. What happened? Take us to the moment when you first heard there was trouble.
Well, we knew when the plane went, we were off the ground and on takeoff, and the plane started to go out of control. It banked to the left, it banked to the right, and then it severely banked to the left, and we ended up doing a cartwheel down the runway.
Whoa!
So,
what goes on, Kendra, inside a plane when it's going around and people are terrified? Is it silence or people screaming?
Oh, no.
What's going on?
People were screaming. It's utter chaos. People were screaming, "Oh my God, we're going to be killed," and it's just terrible. It's your worst nightmare.
Mm-hmm. People always say my whole life flashes in front of my face. Is that true? What did you think?
My life didn't flash in front of me, but I just tried to, I think an instinct takes over to a large part. I happened to grab my wrists and put my head down in my lap and assume some sort of a crash position. And I think that in part helped save my life. Mm-hmm. There were other people that died that had broken necks, and I think that's something that maybe we need to be more aware of, that we need to do everything we can to make sure that seatbelt is buckled tight. If there had been any slack in there, I would have been a missile, like the children are, if they're not safely, securely fastened.
A little later, I want Jan, as a senior flight attendant, to talk about, because that's what they call your children on a flight who you're holding in your arms and not in a car seat. They call them human missiles, because that G-force takes off and they don't have a chance. So we're going to talk more about that too, Jan. We're going to come back to that. Let me introduce you to someone else. Joining us is Geraldine Frankowski. She's the director of the Aviation Consumer Action Project. It's a nonprofit organization founded by Ralph Nader to help improve air travel safety and consumer protection for passengers. Welcome. Nice to have you here, Geraldine. People who might be watching this show right now who are checking their flights and trying to see what time they're packing up, ready to get on a plane to go someplace. Okay. Tell us the top things that we need to be aware of before boarding that flight.
The number one thing is listen to the safety briefing before you take off. And before that flight takes off, notice where your 2 closest emergency exits are. Not just the one that you might see over the wing, which you passed on the way in, but a second exit in case that first exit isn't available. And also count the seat backs between you and those 2 closest exits. Think of how disoriented you get in your house if there's a blackout and all the power goes out and there's a moment where you're disoriented. And then think of that in an aircraft where you're inside the plane and you're in darkness or in smoke. If you count the seat backs, you can feel your way to your closest exit.
That's smart, because the cabin may fill up with smoke and you can't see anymore. Any other suggestions? Jan, talk to us about the children, and Geraldine, come in there too. They do call babies who are not strapped into a seat human missiles. Why?
Well, in extreme situations, such as my accident, their weight multiplies up to 5 times their normal weight, and I never realized this until I saw the studies that the FAA has done in their facilities in Oklahoma City. And I would ask parents, how much does your baby weigh when they're holding them on a lap? And if the average will be about 20 pounds, then you're talking 100.
100 pounds flying through
and
there.
On
the flight that you were on that actually crashed, there were some babies on that flight. What did you see happen to them?
I didn't actually see it. Evan, who was killed on that flight, was 22 months old, and I had most contact with he and his mother. Initially, when the engine exploded, she was becoming hysterical, so when the plane stabilized, I immediately went to her to calm her down, to reassure her. And when I finally had to leave the wreckage because the smoke was so thick, she was the first person that I encountered in the cornfield. She was trying to go back to the plane. I stood in front of her, and she said, "I have to go back, my baby's in there." And I said, "No, you can't go back." And I had not seen the fire, but the smoke itself. She again said, "I have to go back." And so I told her what I felt would stop her from going. I said, "There are men who will go and get him." And then she looked at me and she said, "You told me to put my baby on the floor." And I did, and he's gone.
We'll be right back in a moment.
You're changing so much day by day. I watch you smile, I watch you play, imagining the things you'll do and where your dreams will take you.
Nothing's as exciting as watching babies learn to do new things. And I think Play School's always a few steps ahead here. But the best part is, they make it fun for all of us.
Time goes on, you're always there, giving them your best. Play School, what will they think of next?
That's it, we're through. I don't find you attractive. Truth is, you make me uncomfortable, so this relationship is over. Finito. I've got something new in my life.
New moisture recovery from Lubriderm with alpha hydroxy. It exfoliates old skin, adding nourishing moisture to the skin beneath.
So, move over, baby.
Oh.
Starting now, I'm into a whole new skin. And don't even think about coming back.
New moisture recovery from Lubriderm for the skin you'd rather be in.
Who will take care of this little girl? A family's battle over Brittany. Don't miss the next Rolanda. About surviving airplane disasters. We're live today on Rolanda, so call that number on your screen and come on and join this conversation. You had a question? Yes.
Yes. I can understand how Tawanda feels, because when I travel a lot, and I'll travel with my son when he was younger, and my niece and nephews, and I always wonder why they don't have the babies in a car seat. And one thing, you have to pay for another seat. You have to pay the same amount as your fare, which is not really fair.
Which is why a lot of people don't do that. Which is why a lot of babies die in these crashes, I would think.
Exactly.
Geraldine, what precautions do you take for children, and what should parents keep in mind? Thank you.
Well, parents should keep in mind, as Janice said, that they can bring their car seat. If the car seat is manufactured after 1985, it should say right on the car seat that it's good for use on aircraft. They can bring it on board, and often if the airplane isn't full, if you travel at an off-peak time, you'll be permitted to set up the seat. What we would like to see, though, is a requirement that child safety seats be used, that children get the same protection on an airplane that adults get. Not the right of the parent to use the seat, but the right of that child to have the same protection as every other passenger on that plane.
One of the things we were talking about during the break is that your child not only increases in weight when if there's a problem on the plane, but also the plane may be crashing at 300 miles an hour, and that means your child is moving that fast too, which is why Tawanda had the head injuries to her baby, and the baby is no longer with us. Terry is calling from Florida. Hello, Terry.
Hi.
And your comment, please?
Well, my comment is about the safety of the children, plus also the parents, as well as any other passenger.
Yes.
That they should have on the instruction forms, as well as the screens that they have put up on the air flight, that what you need to do is they have to put the instructions how to put a child's seat in the seat, okay, and instruct that. Put that in the manual as well as telling the passengers.
And like we said, the crews on the aircraft are normally wonderful and will help you do that, I would think. Okay, let's take a look at something here. Terry, join us as we watch this. The videotape of this plane crash that you're about to see is very frightening. It is very graphic, let me warn you. But I also want you to keep in mind that there are no real people on this plane. This is a dummy demonstration. Watch this. Lady just here said, oh my God, and well, you should have. Look at the people inside this flight. This was a test crash conducted by the Federal Aviation Administration. It demonstrates what happens upon impact, both outside and inside the aircraft. And let me tell you this, the FAA says that had those been real people on that flight, they would have survived. So they are survivable. Most crashes do happen upon takeoff and landing, as we've heard also here today. But the biggest threat to passengers is the fire that breaks out after the plane crashes. Believe it or not, we passengers can survive, but a lot depends on whether you know how to get out of the plane quickly enough in the event of an accident. That's one of the things we were talking. Geraldine, anything else that you can think of, or any of those of you who have survived the plane crashes, things that you remember that you took for granted, that you said, boy, if I had been more aware, this might not have happened. Yes?
You made a good point about getting out of the aircraft in time. Fire is going to be your worst enemy in the case of an accident, especially in the case of a post-crash cabin fire where you're in a dark, chaotic environment, as Kendra was describing. Again, knowing where those exits are, not just your first one, but your second closest exit, and how to operate the emergency exit door. Don't rely on just the person that's sitting right there, but you yourself, before you take off, walk up, take a look at that door, and know how to operate it.
And know how to operate it. The instructions are there. Another thing somebody was asking that's a good point, what about having a drink on the plane?
Having a drink on the plane is certainly, it might calm you down, but it's not going to help you in the case of an emergency. It's important to be very alert and prepared and vigilant during takeoff and landing, those phases where you're most likely to encounter some type of trouble.
Okay.
And I think, too, just the opposite. The drink could affect your ability to your faculties to make the right choices and to make the right decisions in the time of an emergency.
Yes, you have to be alert.
I would recommend against having a drink on the plane.
Okay. Are you or somebody you know, or you might yourself be, one of those white knuckle flyers who's scared to death? Well, when we come back, we're going, you're not? Yeah, well, I know some people who are. I'm not either, but I wonder after this conversation. You're going to hear about ways to overcome the fear of flying. And Kendra did something interesting after that plane crash she was in. You know, she said she wanted to come and land right back at LaGuardia the same way, not quite the same way, but back at LaGuardia. She's going to explain why she did that, and we'll take your question. We'll be right back in a minute. LA, guests of the Rolanda Show stay at none other than West Hollywood's chic Mondrian Hotel, located on the world-famous Sunset Strip. Surviving airplane disasters are our topic today on Rolanda during this, the busiest travel week of the year. We are live. We invite you to join the conversation. You see that number on your screen. Come on and call us. You had a question before we left.
I wanted to ask the survivors if any of them had a premonition that the plane would crash.
Anybody?
Nobody?
No premonitions. Now, come on and tell us, Kendra, why you decided, thank you, when you flew back here to New York this time, you said, doggone it, I'm going to fly right back into LaGuardia where I crashed before. Why?
Well, I think you have to face your fear. The pilots and the flight attendants have been wonderful to me. They have been so supportive in my flying. And I just don't think you can live your life in fear. And for that very reason, I did not want U.S. Air to control any more of my life. And I wanted to fly into LaGuardia and face the demon.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, give her. That's right. That's good. This man is impressed with you.
Braver than me, boy.
Braver than him. But you know something, if you don't face your fear, then it turns into a phobia. And we're going to talk to some people about that in just a minute. Brian's calling from New York. Hey, Brian.
Hi, Rolanda. How you doing?
Doing great, thanks.
I've been a big fan since Eyewitness News.
I love you. Thank you. I depend on you.
You're welcome.
What's your question?
In 1986, on Thanksgiving Day, I took a flight from Kennedy Airport to Miami, and on the descent, we hit wind shear, and the plane dropped 10,000 feet in 90 seconds. And the oxygen mask came out, and the crew and the pilot did a remarkable job in getting us out of that situation, but it was absolutely terrifying.
My goodness. Well,
Brian, when we landed, they bought us drinks and gave us the hotel room.
Well, thank goodness, Brian. It's so nice to hear your voice. Do you know, it's estimated that 25 million people have some degree of fear when it comes to flying, and if you didn't have it before, you might have it right now. Our next guests conduct seminars to combat those types of fears. Captain T.W. Cummings, now retired, was a Pan Am pilot himself for over 30 years, and Dr. Diana Ronald is a psychologist who works with Captain Cummings. She is an expert on phobias. Thank you so much for being with us today. First of all, is there a reason to be so overly fearful when we get on a flight?
There's not a reason to be overly fearful, but there's a reason for caution that these people are talking about, listening to the warnings that or the lectures that the flight attendants are given. But actually, Time magazine said it's 100 times safer for you to fly to Florida than to drive. And that other statistic was the odds are 10 million to 1 that you're going to be safe. So the safety is indisputable.
Tawanda is afraid to get back on a flight. In fact, she took a train to our show today. How do you work with people like Tawanda, especially when they've come out of a situation or had a close call or lost a friend or relative? How do you help them overcome the fear, Diana?
First, I think I really feel for Rwanda. That's a terrible, terrible tragedy. And the first part, I think, is not so much dealing with the flying again, but really